Hello, my name is Matt Oswald, and this is part 4 of our Contributing to the NRE Labs curriculum video series. And in this part, we're just going to be taking a look at previewing our content. So in previous videos, we used the Antidote CLI to bootstrap a new lesson. Then we submitted a new pull request to GitHub to the NRE Labs repository. And as part of that pull request, we saw a comment that said something about a content preview. So let's go check that out. So we're here in the pull request that we created in the last video. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, provided again that all of the checks have passed, if they haven't passed, then this won't happen. But if they have passed, if you got a green checkbox here, very soon you'll see a comment by the NRE Labs preview bot. So take a look at the timestamp, make sure it's a recent timestamp. This one was 7 minutes ago, so that's pretty recent. And another thing you can check on is if you look at the details. By the way, this is what it'll look like. Sorry, I meant to collapse that. This is what it'll look like sort of natively. You can actually click details to expand that. Quick thing to check is to just see that this commit ID is the same as the last commit that you pushed. So compare that to this. Looks like that checks out. And of course, you can always click that and it takes you right to the change where you can see the change we made in the last video where we added this text. This will be a new lesson guide. Okay, cool. So that checks out. We have a few tools for us. The very first thing to check out is this link here. So I've constructed a preview of your change, and it is available here at this link. I'm going to middle click this so we can open it in a new tab. You'll see that we have basically a version of the NRE Labs site. The difference is just it's hosted at this weird subdomain. What this basically is a preview of your pull request, and it's a live version of the site that you can poke around with. So we'll head on over to the lesson catalog, clicking Find Lesson Content, and we'll scroll down to our new lesson. You can also type it in the search box if you wish. So we'll click Our New Lesson, and that opens it here in this window. It might take a second to load. I actually preloaded this just for brevity, but there might be a little loading box for you. And you can see that our new lesson is here. Now, of course, we don't have that much in terms of lesson content, so there's not really much to see here, but anything you put in the lesson guide will be displayed here. So that's pretty cool. We have a working terminal. Again, this is the Linux 1 endpoint that we created using the utility image, so that's all ready to go, fully interactive, and we can preview our content thusly. Now, the real question is, what happens if something goes wrong? What do I do to troubleshoot if something were to happen that maybe that didn't allow me to get to this point where I'm actually able to see things? Well, there's a few tools. If we go all the way back to the pull request, we've got a few things to work with. The next line after commit shows us logs. So if we click that, basically what this is a collection of logs for some of the back-end infrastructure. Now, I want to preface this by saying more than likely you won't need to see this. It's likely that if there's a failure, it won't be here. These are really the logs for spinning up the sort of the basic infrastructure for running your preview. Every once in a while, this might present a problem, but usually the kind of problems that present themselves here will be caught earlier using maybe some of the CI checks. But nevertheless, this might be a good thing to peruse if you feel like you'd like to know more about maybe the backend platform and sort of how the curriculum was ingested during that process. Feel free to take a look at this gist. The real meat, I think the real useful tool is this, the Jaeger traces for the lesson. So if you were to click on this Inspect Traces link, what that will do is it'll open a link to this site, inspectpreview.nrelabs.io. And this provides you with a lot, frankly, a plethora of information on some of the things that you were doing with the preview instance. So if you clicked on, usually there will only be one instance here, especially if you've just loaded the preview. We'll click on the oldest one here. These are basically interactions with the preview site that was loaded. So if you click on this one, you'll see a full trace of effectively all of the things that took place within the Antidote platform to make the lesson happen. So for instance, if your lesson had an endpoint in it that maybe wasn't reachable over the network, you would see that as an error here. If, for instance, your configuration script had a problem, you would see that as an error under scheduler configure stuff, which is the apt name trace ID for that, or span ID. And so yeah, there's a few things that you can see here. Again, most of the time a maintainer will be here to help you out with this stuff. The reason this is here is not for sort of you to be on the hook for poking through all this stuff. It's mostly just to provide a little bit of transparency so that you and a maintainer can sort of work together on what the problem is. This is by the way, this is a trace that sort of indicates no problems. Everything seems to be good. If there was a problem, there would be some sort of a red circle that says, hey, there's an error here. Since we don't see that, it generally seems like everything happened pretty well. And of course, since we were able to load the lesson, we know that that's true. So that is the preview functionality. And again, if you want to add changes, let's say we go into the lesson and say, this lesson guide is kind of anemic. Let's push forward and maybe add some content here. We absolutely can and should do that. And so in the last video, we just added additional commits to the branch. The pull request was automatically updated. And again, if the checks pass okay, a new preview will be generated with those new changes, and you can iterate really as many times as you need to get the lesson finished. And then basically once you're done, when you're ready for a review, you basically say, hey, maintainer, leave a comment and say, hey, I think this is ready for a review. The preview looks pretty good to me. And a maintainer will come by just to make sure everything checks out. And that covers the preview functionality. From there, you'll go through the review process, which is covered in our docs. Head on over to docs.nrelabs.io. Thanks.